So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jenna Ludke. I am the Director of Intercultural and Interfaith Programs at the Rumi Forum in Washington, D.C. It's an honor to be with you this morning. For preventing violence and achieving world peace, the contributions of the Gulen movement. And I would like to invite first to the podium the Rumi Club President, Serdar Gürses, for opening remarks. Serdar is a PhD student in genetics at the University of Maryland, College Park.
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Serdar Gürses. I am the president of the Rumi Club, not just Rumi Club, at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'm as a PhD student at the Department of Cellular Biology and Molecular Genetics. We have got these really long names to make it, I guess, look more interesting, more attractive. So we are organizing this conference here today together with Rumi for Maryland branch and with the co-sponsorship of the Department of Anthropology and also with the help of the graduate student government. They wanted us to tell specifically that this organization also received funding from graduate student government. As grad students, our fees go to events like this, so it's good to know that too. So one of the questions that we have in our mind is, why did we organize this conference? Aren't there enough peace conferences going around? Why make another one? And the answer to that is, we didn't just make a regular peace conference and talk about how we can achieve peace. We wanted absolutely to learn more about peacemaking, more about preventing violence, to update ourselves, maybe look at this issue from different perspectives. But we also wanted to learn what the Gulen movement did in this manner, in this regard. So I'm not going to talk about the Gulen movement. Hopefully the speakers will let you know more about that. But I think the Gulen movement is not appreciated enough in this sense, and we wanted to learn and make others learn in this manner, in this sense, what this movement has achieved worldwide, actually, because this movement is a worldwide movement. It has got many arms in many. It's got many arms in various areas, education areas, helping people in need, and these all, we believe, contribute to peacemaking. Well, I'm not going to take too much of your time because I'm not too much of a talker. So again, thanks for coming, and I hope that you all enjoy this conference.
Now I would like you to direct your attention to the screen, which is going to drop momentarily, and we will watch the video of the conference.
In the early hours of one July morning, 4 men set out on a journey. A journey that would end their lives and the lives of many more. How could they do this? How could 4 citizens of this country do this to their own homeland, to their own fellow citizens? What went into the building of such a degree of hatred and contempt for human life? Their journey ended in violent self-destruction. Our journey begins with the questions. Where do we go from here? What do we do to stop this happening again?
Now I would like to introduce to you Professor Ori Soltis. He's from Georgetown University, and he's here with us to give the keynote speech. The title of his speech is Socrates, Violence, Education, the Gulen Movement, and Peace. That's a mouthful. So if you will please help me in welcoming Dr. Soltis. Okay. And if I may tell you a bit about Ori. Ori Soltis is professorial lecturer in theology and fine arts at Georgetown University and former director of the B'nai B'rith Klutznick National Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., where he curated over 80 exhibitions on a variety of topics. He is the author of over 150 articles, exhibition catalogs, essays, and books on a range of topics, including Our Sacred Signs, How Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Art Draw from the Same Source, and The Ashen Rainbow, Essays on the Arts and the Holocaust, and Searching for Oneness with the One, Mysticism in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Traditions. Professor Soltis is conversant in over a dozen languages and has lectured throughout America and in Europe, Asia, and Central America. He is currently at work on a book on the relationship between the thought of Fethullah Gulen and Jalaluddin Rumi. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ori Soltis.
And I apologize because I will have to leave immediately when I finish, because I have 3 classes that I teach at Georgetown today, the first one of which is at 11, so I'll be rushing. I apologize. It's a course on the problem of God, by the way. Yes, a mouthful: Socrates, Violence, Education, the Gulen Movement, and Peace. For Socrates, as some of you may know, there are at least 3 very key issues that he reflected on and that are reflected in his thinking. One issue is the issue of definition. So, for example, Socrates would look at that word violence and he'd say, well, we must distinguish between natural acts of violence like a tsunami or a hurricane or a volcano. Those are forms of violence in which humans are affected, but over which humans have no control. He distinguished between that and human-made violence, the kind that we associate with murder and war, the kind that we could further subdivide, as it were, among violence against the self, violence against the family, violence in domestic, in communal, in international kinds of contexts, violence against the other, whoever the other happens to be, whatever the other happens to be, committing aggression, using extreme force, that would be violence. And Socrates would no doubt distinguish violence from struggle, as, for example, if he were to speak Arabic, the Arabic word jihad, where I am enjoined to struggle with myself and to struggle within the Muslim world and to struggle within the world at large, to act in accordance with and to submit to God's will, and indeed to struggle with the question of whether my struggle should include or should not include violence. All of that would be part of Socrates' pattern and policy of trying to define terms, which in turn engages a second feature of his thought, ethics. Socrates always made ethics a necessary component to every process in which humans engage, from carpentry to serving as jurors in the courtroom. Socrates indeed adds to the Greek word arete, which prior to his time means a skill in effect, a knack. He adds an ethical component such that being good at that which one does cannot, or should not anyway, be separated from the moral consequences of what one does. And in turn, of course, a third feature of what we associate with Socrates is dialogue. Definition, ethics, dialogue. Dialogue as the most effective means, the most effective process of defining terms and of bringing ethics into nearly every discussion. We are all, as Socrates understands, inherently imperfect. And among our imperfections, we may miss our own flaws, or flaws in our own arguments, our own thoughts, our own patterns of definition, our own thinking regarding ethics, while seeing the flaws of others. And of course, others will be flawed in missing their own imperfections, but see ours. So an exchange, a cross-examination of each other's ideas, the term in Greek is elenchos, cross-examination, offers the most reliable and effective means of arriving at effective definitions of an endless array of terms and concepts, from violence and struggles to defining chairness or tableness or piety or courage or justice. It is Socrates' pupil Plato to whom we owe most of our knowledge of what Socrates taught and how he did so. In Plato's Republic, for example, Socrates begins by discussing justice in the individual soul, shifts then to the idea of justice within the state, and then outlines an extensive educational system through which ideal leaders of an ideal state will be trained to think, to define, to dialogue, to cross-examine each other in order to function in an ethical manner and thereby shape a just state as a stepping stone to shaping a just and ethical world. He calls these leaders guardians, and they will arrive to their position of leadership not through blood connections or economic advantage, but through exhibiting the meritorious manner that will make of them appropriate leaders. Everyone in the ideal republic receives an education, everyone does, basic at its early levels, and specialized in accordance with talents and inclinations as students progress. Guardians receive instruction in an array of disciplines, from mathematics and the sciences to music and poetry and sports, or as the Greeks speak of it, gymnastics. They mean sports in general, although I don't think they played basketball yet, or even baseball. In brief, education is, for Plato's Socrates, the ultimate instrument through which the human capacity is developed to the highest point. For Fethullah Gulen, among the figures he clearly admires and emulates is Socrates, and we would not all be here at this conference today were it not for Gulen's emphatic interest in and support of the notion of dialogue. His writings cover a range of different territories wherein dialogue is emphasized, but in a manner that expands to explicitness what the term implies for Socrates. For Socrates never left Athens, much less Greece, so the world in which he pursued ethical and other truths through definition and dialogue, through elenchos and cross-examination, and sometimes endless seeming conversation, was a far more limited one than that through which Gulen has moved. Socrates' primary, nearly his only partners and audiences in his efforts were freeborn Athenian males, while on occasion, as for example in the dialogue The Meno, he might make use of an untutored slave boy to make a point about how we learn, or he might reference, not unimportantly, a woman, such as Diotima, in the Symposium, to present a definition and understanding of love. He never needs to consider non-Greek thinkers with regard either to their sense of our world or of the world of the gods. And he readily recognizes different gods and different viewpoints, therefore, on any ethical issue as the proper perspective regarding a universe that is understood by him to be shaped by the gods. Gulen lives and thinks in a world dominated not only by a concept of a single God, but by contending concepts of what exactly that God is and how to understand what that God's purposes and intentions are regarding humanity. His world, Gulen's world, unlike Socrates' world, is shaped by a vast diversity of ethnicities and nationalities with their own traditions and their unique senses of how best to be in the world. Thus, Gulen's concept of dialogue is, as it were, broader than that of Socrates. Elenchos, for him, in the ideal, takes place not only both within and beyond the ivory towers, but both within Islam, within Turkey, and the larger Turkic world, and between Muslims and non-Muslims, Turks and non-Turks. So how can such dialogue happen? There are at least two parts of the answer to that question. The second, because I want to go in reverse order just to keep people awake from time to time, the second is the willingness to reach out, individual to individual, and group to group, community to community, spiritual tradition to spiritual tradition, religious tradition to religious tradition. For this sensibility, Gulen's most important model is Jalaluddin Rumi, the renowned 13th century poet and mystic, another key source of his thought, as we heard toward the end of that film, and the one for whom this very forum is named, Rumi, whose world, like Gulen's and unlike Socrates' world, was multicultural, multi-ethnic, and interdenominational. It was Rumi who wrote, Christian, Jew, Muslim, shaman, Zoroastrian, stone, ground, mountain, river, each has a secret way of being with the mystery, unique and not to be judged. So, dialogue along the kinds of lines that are implied by Rumi's words inspire the words and the thinking of Gulen when he thinks about that as an answer to the question, how does one begin to move toward perfecting the world? But the first part of the process is education to be able to be ready for dialogue. To do this, the training of guardians, of leaders who are intellectually and spiritually equipped to relish and sustain dialogue, to wrestle with definition, to recognize with humility the limits of any individual's or any group's ability to understand and know anything absolutely, most particularly the absolute. It is our inherent limitations that make it so necessary for us to pursue dialogue if we are to find our way to truth. And it is education along corporeal, mental, and spiritual lines that can facilitate this. Gulen has written that, and I'm quoting him, it's from his essays, Perspectives and Opinions, page 80, if you want to look it up. We are creatures comprised of not only a body or mind or feelings or spirit, rather we are harmonious compositions of all of these elements. When a man or a woman around whom all systems and efforts resolve is considered and evaluated as a creature with all these aspects, and when our needs are fulfilled, we will reach true happiness. At this point in human history, true human progress and evolution in relation to our essential being is only possible with education. For Gulen, as for Socrates then, education is the ultimate means by which humans become what God created us to be, which makes education the most important project in which humans can engage. To become fully human, and in the sense in which the term Muslim refers to someone who submits to God's will, education is the primary means through which together we can develop the instruments through which, in dialogue with each other, we can perhaps deduce what precisely that will is. Moreover, even if we fail at arriving at certainty regarding divine will, as again and again and again Socrates and his interlocutors failed to arrive at certainty regarding the definition of justice or of peace or of piety or of chairness or tableness, even if we fail to arrive at precise knowledge regarding divine will, we shall have improved the world by the very process of inquiry. The Gulen movement is the Plato to Gulen's Socrates. We would not know Socrates' thought without Plato's texts. We might know Gulen's thoughts without the Gulen movement because Gulen has written so extensively, but we might have no opportunity to see the activation of Gulen's theoretical discussions, or to use Socratic terminology, to see how the logos, the account of something, becomes ergon, becomes activated on the ground. The talk becomes walk. We couldn't see that without the movement and what it has created. Plato's Socrates both exemplifies and suggests the importance again and again and again of turning theory, logos, into action, ergon. But Socrates' Plato failed to shape the heir to the throne of Syracuse as the ideal leader the philosopher king theorized about in the Republic, and so had to content himself with creating an ivory tower in which generation after generation of leaders might be trained to think. Gulen's sermons, Gulen's speeches, Gulen's writings have led to guardians, to use Socrates' term, individuals who were attuned to the issues of ethical leadership through a constantly expanding network of educational institutions. within the panoply of hundreds of schools, from the elementary to the university level, thousands of students across national, ethnic, and even religious boundaries, as you just heard a moment back, study an extended array of disciplines, even more extensive than that described by Socrates in the Republic: science and mathematics, history, language and literature, social and cultural studies, art, music, and sports. Such programs teach discussion and negotiation, not violence and hatred, as the way to be in the world. From Turkey itself to Central Asia, Europe, Africa, and America, Gulen movement students are provided, as you saw a moment back, with teachers of exemplary dedication, curricula of ambitious quality, and I have visited several Gulen schools, and I can speak of this from personal observation and not merely from hearsay or what I've seen or read, and an embracing vision that looks to global betterment through the teaching of tolerance, of difference, and embracing dialogue. One might say that the Gulen movement schools extend the educational model of Plato's Socrates in the Republic. Not only do the students and their teachers extend beyond the narrow ethnic and sociological model that was necessarily central to Socrates' vision, but where Socrates sought to censor classical moments in literature and art that he felt might be psychologically damaging to future guardians, the Gulen movement follows a far more embracing, broadly embracive ideology without the sort of censorship that Socrates prescribed for his schools. Beyond these splendid ivory towers, the Gulen movement extends a web of dialogue by means of media of diverse sorts, as also you've just heard about briefly, from paper-based to electronic-based modes of communication, newspapers, journals, for extending both education and the discourse toward which education ideally pushes us. A varied range of cable and internet programming extend the potential web of dialogue around the globe. For a forum such as the Rumi Forum that has sponsored this conference, and which again and again, in concert with other groups and organizations, sponsors so many other conferences, symposia, lectures, discussions, these are the proof of the feasibility of seeking peace along the broadest of lines through dialogue. Such efforts are neither casual nor vague. They represent an ongoing struggle of the sort that Socrates and Plato had in mind when they spoke of the birth of ideas, of which the dialogue process is the midwife, as a painful birthing, of the pain of perplexity as yielding the beginning of knowledge. It's of the sort of which Islam speaks when it uses the concept of jihad in reference to examining how one is in the world so that one conforms to God's will. It's of the sort that Judaism uses in referring to the phrase tikkun olam, improving the world, that Christianity uses when it uses the term caritas, referring both to love that begets charity and not only to charity that comes from sources other than love, that offers something that is embracing and positive and not merely negative, because you can give charity in a negative and not only in a positive way. It's of a sort that myriads of traditions offer with regard to improving the world in a partnership with each other and with God, which struggle has a precise goal, and that is to make life better, worth living. For Socrates and Plato asserted that the only kind of life worth living is one in which we are constantly cross-examining ourselves and each other, thinking, raising questions, seeking answers, and not only to matters that have definitive answers. In the end, the intention, to end where I began, with Socrates' focus on definition, is not to achieve peace defined simply as a mere absence of violence, of physical and emotional aggression, an absence of war, and to be satisfied with calling that absence peace. It is to achieve a fullness of peace, salam, shalom, that encompasses not mere toleration, but an embrace, not mere toleration, but an embrace of our diversity as a species, even with respect to our endlessly varied views of divinity. It is to arrive at the fullness of spirit encapsulated by Jalaluddin Rumi in his words, "Come, come, whoever you are, heathen, fire worshiper, or idolaters, come. Ours is the portal of hope. Come as you are. This is ultimately what the Gulen movement strives to realize as a global reality, a reality which through diverse educational means can help eliminate violence and expand the presence of peace from one end of the globe to the other. Thank you all very much.